Hello again YouTube, and welcome to the Pain Cave. A couple of updates for you today. Firstly, on the rebuilt Trek, and then I'm going to give you an update on what I'm turning my attention to next. So let's begin with that lovely old Trek Damani 4.5. So you're probably all familiar with, if you've seen the previous videos, what I did to this. And I've now had an opportunity to spin the pedals on the road and see what it's like. So I'm just going to talk you through the highlights. I think for me, one of the biggest concerns was the Q-rings. And there's something I've never used before. And you have to get this optimum chainring position, which if you look at some videos on this online, it can get quite technical using one of Rotor's own power meters to judge where you're making the power in the cycle and stuff like that. However, they do give you kind of a recommended setting to put them on, which is kind of the universal one that works for most people. And I chose that, setting 3 on the chain rings there, and it works fine for me. Now, you do have to physically bed in with these chain rings. You go through kind of a few phases with them. There's kind of an adaptation phase because you are clearly just using muscles differently than you've used them before. And then there's a couple of other phases before you're fully established with them. I think I'm still in the adaptation phase. And I must admit, I'm getting some, I would say soreness, not pain or discomfort, but soreness in parts of my legs that I haven't previously when I've been cycling. So I can only imagine that that's because I'm using the power and the muscles differently, or what have you, something like that. In terms of how they feel, I love them. Really, really like them. Now, take that with a pinch of salt, because I don't think they'll be for everybody. They don't strike me as the sort of thing that's going to make you a hell of a lot faster. Equally, they don't strike me as something that would be really good for somebody who's into sprinting. Where they feel best is where you hit a climb, an incline, or even, do you know what, even a headwind or something like that. And what I find with them is the difference between these and the round chain rings is I get to that point where normally I'd be snicking down a gear or possibly pedaling squares, and I just don't. I can just keep going. And it's a really strange sensation. It's hard to describe unless you felt it, but it just feels like something has changed, that I'm able to make power in places that I wasn't able to make power before. Certainly they've helped me on climbs, and where I live is quite flat and open, so we get a lot of headwinds here, and I've noticed that as you push into a headwind, I just keep pushing with them, whereas on conventional chain rings, you know, that's where I'd be sort of snicking down or sort of like considering getting a bus or something like that. So yeah, very, very happy with them. In terms of actually how they feel, I thought they'd feel really weird. Because obviously, you know, you've got that oval pattern on the chain ring. I thought you'd actually feel that the pedals would go slack at some point in the pedal cycle. But do you know what? If you blindfolded me, stuck me on that bike, I wouldn't have a clue that these weren't round chain rings. They just feel very natural. So yeah, I think that they were a really good investment. Now, I've got some issues that I'm working through. The chain is skipping on the cassette at the back when you get into the smaller cogs. And I actually think it could be a compatibility issue. It's the first time I've used a SRAM chain with Shimano cassette. And I just wonder if there's a compatibility thing going on there. Because everything else is fine. The mech's adjusted properly, it's working properly. It's not that old, to be honest with you. So all things considered, and I've even checked the chain length because I thought that the chain was probably a bit slack, and did even take a couple of links out, but it hasn't resolved it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pay up and just get a proper Shimano chain and possibly a new cassette, because all the cassettes that I've got quite a few miles on them. Right, well, no sooner had I recorded that intro saying that the chain was skipping, and I fixed it. Basically down to a worn cassette, which wasn't becoming very good friends with this new SRAM chain. So yeah, yeah, that's a little bit of indexing required, but essentially that is fixed. The other big improvement that I made to the bike was those 105 R7000 brake calipers, and I love them. They are honestly really, really good. I would say if you just had 70 quid knocking about and you were looking for an upgrade for your bike, and you're on something like 105 brake calipers, old 105, or even unbranded brake calipers, which seems to be the norm these days. The wife's new Trek we bought, the AL3, came with just kind of an unbranded brake caliper on there. These would be such a good upgrade. And I actually think that brakes are one of these things that are overlooked in terms of it being a performance upgrade, because it doesn't actually increase your speed or your power. But for me, what they do is they allow you to preserve your speed and power, because obviously if you've got more confidence going into a corner on the brakes, you can carry more speed into the corner and you can be more fluid and finessed with your braking through the corner. I've also noticed that with the old 105 calipers, when I get sort of like a good few miles under the belt, and my hands begin to ache, and the old 105 calipers needed a hell of a pull to pull the bike up. With these, I'm using probably 50% of the power that I was before, maybe even less. You almost just breathe on them and the bike is slowing down. Love them to bits, and like I say, for 70 quid, I think that would be a worthwhile upgrade to anybody's bike. So that's the Trek talked about. Let me tell you about the other update I wanted to give you, which is what I'm turning my attention to now, my next project, which is, well, me, to be honest with you. When I started this channel, as it is, the Fat Triathlete, I kind of wanted it to be, at the time I was aware I'd lost some fitness and I'd put on some timber, and I wanted to do this almost as a bit of a journey, you know, like this is me getting back to fitness, getting back into Ironman and all that good stuff. And then I started sort of like messing around with mountain bikes and messing around with my road bikes and doing various other bits and pieces. And it never really became that. And I've had quite a challenging domestic situation over the last couple of years, which has kind of drawn my focus away from training and, you know, taken a lot of time away as well. So all the good plans that I had, all the good intentions kind of went out the window, and I lost my way, really. But I've got to the point now where I've just said, do you know what, I've got to do something about this. I really have got to shift some of that timber and get back some of, or if not all of, that fitness that I had before. And I'm really intent on doing it. And I was sitting here in the pain cave a couple of weeks back, and it was almost like I had one of those light bulb moments. Going back 18 months or so, I'd taken a weights bench out of the pain cave here, and I'd put in a comfy chair, a big IKEA bouncy leather comfy chair, and it was lovely. It was a bit too lovely, because then I'd spend my evenings in here. I'd come in, sit my backside down in that chair, probably neck a few beers during the evening and just watch television. And it wasn't a good thing, you know, it wasn't a positive thing. And I was sitting there in this leather chair and I thought, what the hell did you put this in here for? So it's gone. And it's been replaced with this Men's Health weights bench. So this is a Men's Health active weight bench from Argos, about 80 quid. I did have the previous version of this bench in here before I put the IKEA chair in. And it's in the loft somewhere, but they've made some improvements to it, so I bought the new one. I thought for 80 quid I can't be bothered to go and see if I've got all the nuts and bolts for the old one and put it back together. So I just went and bought the new one, and I'm very happy because it's got thicker padding on it. It's definitely a lot sturdier than the old model, but really for me the big win is this preacher pad at the front has now got a little spring release on it. The old one didn't. It had... He says, going out of shot. Yeah, the old one had a screw thread. So basically had a big knob you had to unscrew every time you wanted to take the preacher pad out. It was a pain in the butt. So I've got this in here. I've paired it up with my trusty old set of dumbbells, which I think the wife wanted to throw away at some point, but I I just always thought I'd keep. And what I've done is I've put together a training plan, because I definitely find that I work better if I've got a plan. So the plan begins gently, because, you know, I have lost quite a bit of fitness, but also I wanted this to be, I often get asked by people at work, you know, and this really does happen, I'm not making this up, because they're aware that, you know, I've done all the good Ironman stuff and cycling and what have you. And they'll often ask me, you know, I want to start doing something, what should I do? So I thought, wouldn't it be good if I sort of like roll it back just for myself and think, oh, if I was starting from the beginning, where would I begin? So this is a plan that in the first 4 weeks just ramps up gently, doesn't go above sort of zone 4. And I'm using the Watt Bike workouts for that, basically. I begin it with a submax ramp test, because I didn't want to dive straight in an FTP test. I don't think that's appropriate for a beginning or restarting plan. I think really for me what you need to do is you need to get at least a month of solid training under your belt before you then do your FTP test. So basically, yeah, that's it. Begin with the submax test, month sort of zones 1 to 4, and then FTP test in the second month, and ramp it up from there. So yeah, I've bought the weights bench really to get rid of the comfy chair and to stop me just sitting my ass down and drinking beer. But also I think that for any sort of fitness plan, especially if you want to shift a bit of timber, you really should be mixing in some strength training with your cardio. So that's the whole point of this. So yeah, a couple of quick updates there. Hopefully I can mix in some more of this personal training stuff that I'm doing for myself. And I'll catch you in the next one. See you next time, YouTube.